I've been experiencing some pretty bad luck since this dead Arnuki beast came into my possession. But that's not exactly what today's video is about. Today's video is about America's parks, more specifically the Appalachian Trail. Now, I've made quite a few videos on old Appalachia. You fellers know that I'm an Appalachian boy. And while in Canada recently, I did some reading, I did some research, and it sprung this video idea into my mind. And that is the seeming fact on the internet that America's parks are horrifying. America's national forests, the public land, people go missing constantly. They're terrifying, they're horrifying, they're full of cryptids and monsters. People vanish without a trace. Footprints stop in the middle of a trail, search dogs circle and howl as if a person ceased to exist. There's even an incredibly popular project online called Missing 411, which I'm sure you guys have heard of if you're interested in anything like this. So what exactly does all this mean? I'm not totally sure, but there is an obvious and simple suggestion, and that is there is something scary that is taking people and we can't exactly explain it. And today we're diving into the Appalachian Trail rabbit hole of this whole thing. Not specifically Missing 411, but the horror of trails, the forest, the region. It's a very powerful thing, but is it true? Is it actually that scary? We'll start with some quick facts and a bit of context. The Appalachian Trail runs a little over 2,190 miles across 14 states. Millions of people visit this area every single year, and millions of people live very close, in very close proximity to it. There's no single national database that neatly counts every single missing person that's connected to parkland, and that includes the lack of categorization of missing persons on trail or near trail. Did you just go into the park? Were you on the Appalachian Trail? Those are two very different things. So we have to keep that in mind. I myself grew up at the northern gateway to the Appalachian Trail in Front Royal, Virginia. That is where I am from. Locals once called it Helltown, and everybody who grew up there has heard the stories of that place scary as shit back we used to come here to get in fights. My grandfather used to go to Front Royal when he was young to fight people, to beat people up and like go to bars and fight people and stuff. And as a kid, I thought the stories were just stories until, you know, the internet comes along and you can read about it, and it is an absolutely bonkers area. And it is magical and beautiful. A lot of lesbians in Linden. I don't know if that's true or not. I used to hear that though a lot. I don't know if that's true or not. Apparently there's a damn lesbian stronghold, all right, just to the damn east of where I'm from. All right, okay, come on now. It's so funny to say online. Anyways, if the internet's claim to the dangerous, terrifying nature of the national park, specifically Appalachia, is correct, we should find the same pattern here in this area. People who vanish, predators hiding in plain sight, footprints that end where fear begins. The trail and mountains from Georgia to North Carolina are pretty steep, a lot of roots. It's a difficult climb. The Blood Mountain is an early gate into the Appalachian Trail. And that's a crazy name, by the way, for a mountain. Then we get to Virginia, which is more than 25% of the Appalachian Trail footpath. And the whole thing is stunningly beautiful, but I'm particularly fond of the Virginia footpath. Then you get to Pennsylvania, which has a ton of ankle-turning rocks. It slows you down quite a bit, and along the trail, there are shelters only every 8 to 12 miles in some stretches, so it gets very difficult in Pennsylvania. Then the mid-Atlantic to New England, there is poor cell service. The weather swings are a bit sharper up there, especially going into winter. It's a pretty punishing area. You don't really associate the mid-Atlantic, this area, with scariness, but I mean, the Pine Barrens of New Jersey are terrifying.
You're not gonna believe this. He killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Guy was an interior decorator.
His house looked like shit.
Not in Appalachia, to be fair, but still. And the shelters along the trail are these little 3-walled wooden structures that are spaced out, and they concentrate people and stories. People go there, they talk, honestly, that happens. All of the shelters that I have seen have a register, a notebook of sorts where hikers can leave warnings, write their names, write poetry, swap gear, gossip, talk about local serial killers, which is genuinely what happened at one where I went. So this brings us to the incredibly creepy legend of the Wolfman of Helltown. The rabbit hole for this alone is surprisingly deep. I had no idea. I've met the Wolfman of Helltown, and that is not a joke, but there's videos like this, people on the Appalachian Trail seeing notes scrawled all around. If you search the Wolfman of Helltown, there's writings about him from forums back in 2010, mid-2000s. This guy is an absolute legend of the Appalachian Trail, and he talks about things like abductions and murders and the deaths of people that need to be investigated. There are a ton of pictures of his actual writings online that you can find, and I have met this guy. So first, we'll talk about my experience with him. I don't remember what year it was, but I was probably 15, 16 years old. I was hiking the Appalachian Trail in an area where you're not supposed to go. So basically I wasn't hiking the Appalachian Trail. Let's just say I was hiking some train tracks somewhere illegal. Not, I wasn't supposed to go, but I went there a lot, all right? Along these train tracks, we see a power box of some kind, maybe a switch of something, I don't know, some kind of utility panel box, a metal box. And on this, my friend and I, who I'm hiking with, walk up to it, we read some text, a very bizarre message about remember Lobo, which means remember a wolf. I think Lobo is like the scientific name for a wolf or some shit. And below that was your garden variety insane ramblings, okay? Talking about all sorts of crazy shit, enough to freak us out. We read this, read Remember Lobo and the Wolfman of Helltown. And in that moment in which we're reading it and, you know, our skin's crawling, we're like, this is really creepy. We turn around and there's a guy with a wolf dog, whatever, a gigantic wolf creature and a fella walking behind us. We did not hear him. We'd been walking for a very long time in the same direction as him. So he had caught up with us somehow, or he had come off out of the forest or something onto the completely legal train tracks we were walking on. He appeared behind us, said, "Hey, buddy." He didn't say that shit, but he did say something. I don't remember what it was. I do remember being very startled and unnerved, and the skin was crawling, and we talked about it for the rest of the time on our way to our destination and back, and told everybody about it because we had already heard of this guy. And of course we had heard that he was a mass murdering serial killer, abductor, whatever but I don't know if there's any real proof of that. I don't know. Actually, I do know that there is no real proof of him being anything other than a guy who writes insane shit on notes and leaves those notes around, okay? The internet seems to think that he might be a bit of a serial killer, Garth Brooks style, okay? I don't think so. I think he's a crazy guy who is very interesting, who had a scary, gigantic dog, and this guy reveled in being a living legend on the Appalachian Trail. There's so much information online about this. You can see tons of signs, images, pictures. This, for example, looks almost exactly like what we saw on our power box. This one says, "Feds have been removing more of my work when I leave." This post includes the Carver Hills, Georgia abduction story, Loganville, Georgia, fatal house fire story, some website name, Miguel Garcia death story, some Virginia Ann Mohanan obituary, I'm not sure, mall shooting story, Wolfman of Helltown, aka Woody, etc. Look at that, isn't that wild? That's very similar in the same type of writing. And then you have this one, CIA monkey crew behind Target. By the way, Target is across the street from this sign. This is where I grew up. This is in Front Royal. This guy says it's not in Pennsylvania, but this is, I know where this is. This is an exit coming out of Front Royal, getting on to 66. So not to expose this guy, but whatever, you'll be all right. It's a crazy rabbit hole, but that's what it is. It's just crazy. It doesn't appear to have any real sort of horror elements other than it freaking the out of a lot of people who have been on the Appalachian Trail. There's even people talking about it online, saying that they avoided certain shelters, or when they slept, they woke up, they had notes on their sleeping bags that this guy wrote. So he's a weird mother for sure, dude. But is he a cryptid? Doesn't seem like it. He's definitely not a part of the CIA monkey crew behind Target. That's me. For clarification, he has written stuff like "I've killed before," like literally that, "I am killer," essentially. But obviously, given his other writings, it's just ramblings. Now we can move on to much more real, horrifying things. But if you guys have ever experienced the Wolfman of Helltown or have ever even heard of that, comment down below. I know there's probably not that many people who watch my videos who are from Appalachia, but especially not Front Royal. But this is like a huge legend growing up, so I'm excited to actually be able to talk about it in a video. Proper etiquette, by the way, if you run into the Wolfman of Helltown, start arguing politics immediately. Talk about religion nonstop. In fact, make up a religion on the spot. If you have a headlamp, turn it off, go, run around in the woods. And if you're with others, wake them up and get them to do the exact same thing. In fact, start arguing amongst yourselves. That's how to stay safe when you're on the Appalachian Trail and there might be a legend lurking. And the Wolfman of Helltown is just one of the legends in regard to the Appalachian Trail. This video is brought to you by the Legend of Zolk. Never heard of Legend of Zolk? That's because it didn't exist until like a week ago. I made it. It's my game. I made it. It's the first game I ever made, guys. And it is a free-to-play mobile game. Kind of embarrassing, a little bit, but also it's cool and I really want to add more stuff to it. Leave feedback. I know, Android users. It's not on Android yet. It's on iOS only.
Random side note, I'm very ill right now. That's why my hair looks like this, but I'm about to push a build for Mac to do some bug fixes. And also there is an Android version coming. Whoa, I look stupid. I look so stupid. I'm about to push a build. Tell me what's wrong with it. What are your guys' problems and what do you hate about it? We're adding a boss fight soon and the Android version is coming like maybe by the end of this week. Hopefully, I hope. So, you know, I don't own any Android devices, so I had to buy an Android.
Go to the App Store, download it, leave a 5-star review. You won't get anything in return, but hopefully starting very soon, we're gonna take the high scores of the first of the month and give those people some free candy from Sour Boys. We're using this game as an avenue for lore, creating art, putting new cool stuff into it, and hopefully, you know, allowing people to have some fun. And more specifically, selfishly for me, it is my first exercise in the world of game dev. It's a simple game, so I don't have any excuses to not make it good and better and actually learn these systems and understand how this works. I originally came up with the idea because I wanted to put Subway Surfers beside my videos as a joke, but the version of Subway Surfers was one that I made. Now it's on the App Store, so if you guys want to play my stupid joke and maybe put it in under your memes instead of Subway Surfers, go ahead. And if you want me to add anything, let me know as well. Anyways, thanks for sponsoring company that I own. And also thanks for watching and thanks for playing. Yeah, anyways, enjoy the rest of the video. People are obviously very scary and cryptids, legends, things like that are terrifying. But the most terrifying aspect of this area is just nature itself. Take, for example, the case of Geraldine Inchworm Largay. In 2013, Geraldine stepped off trail in Maine and missed her re-entry to the trail. She survived 26 days and died less than a mile from the nearest road. A survey crew found her 2 years later after she had died. Her story is absolutely heartbreaking, and it wasn't a predator, someone in the trees, a legend. It is a story of just how quickly the woods can erase you from existence. We've talked about quite a few incidents from further in the past where people don't have cell phones, you know, in a time when it was much easier to get lost and much more difficult to be found. But Geraldine tried to text for help. The messages were never sent. She set up camp, tried to conserve her energy, and even kept a journal. Search teams walked within a few hundred yards of her, but nothing can stop the terrain and the environment. And in this specific area, at eye level, there was a very thick understory, uneven ground, and it was just impossible to see. So the poor visibility at eye level led to the search being difficult and ultimately ending up failing. So Geraldine's story is a tragedy like the others, but hers happened in a more modern time in which she was found quickly, and there was a clear and clean explanation as to what happened to her. If we go a bit back in time, things become far less clear as to what happened to the people who went missing in these areas. We have the case of Dennis Martin from 1969 and the case of Polly Melton from 1981. Dennis Martin we've talked about before in past videos, and his case has been covered many times on YouTube. It's an absolutely tragic and terrifying story. Similar to Dennis, Polly also disappeared without a real trace. Polly walked over a hill on a simple, familiar Smoky Mountain trail and was never seen again. And the story goes that search dogs reached her last known spot and circled and howled because they couldn't find her trail. Dennis vanished in a similar area in the Smokies years earlier, which triggered the park's largest search at that time, which was back in the 60s. And both of these cases and unsolved missing persons stories live in the orbit of the national park, and specifically Appalachian Trail myth even though these people didn't go missing on the footpath itself. So unanswered stories are the fuel that builds this entire mythos and legend around all this stuff, and why everybody is so, it seems like, afraid. Just fear, I guess, is a very basic human function and serves us on a pretty effective level, but unanswered is obviously not the same as unexplainable. So with all this information, all these legends, all these YouTube videos, all the stuff you hear, you'd think that people go missing all the time on the Appalachian Trail, or specifically in national forests. But missing on the Appalachian Trail specifically covers anything from a day hiker who's overdue for dinner to a multi-day search for someone who left the corridor entirely. And once again, like I mentioned in the beginning, there is no centralized or authoritative database for missing persons, unanswered questions, things like that. But ranger districts, sheriffs, and the ATC commonly report an average of about 6 people who are reported missing on or along specifically the Appalachian Trail a year. And most of those people are found within 24 to 72 hours. There has only been 10 to 13 people who have died or permanently went missing until they died on the Appalachian Trail since records were kept. So you'd think this massive trail in this area, Appalachia's, this, horrifying, oh my God, it's just people out camping and stuff, they're just going missing. But it is extremely uncommon, albeit very creepy when it does happen, and the unanswered cases are head scratchers. So nature is definitely the culprit to some of the more creepy unsolved cases, but there's also just murderers and serial killers who tend to murder and serial kill in areas where there aren't that many people around, and the Appalachian Trail and national parks in general, those areas definitely fall into that criteria. Take, for example, Gary Hilton, a man who was born in 1946 and by his 60s was a drifter living out of his van, bouncing between national forests across the Southeast. He was an experienced outdoorsman. He knew the terrain of the local areas, and he knew the isolated trails where people would hike alone. And on New Year's Day in 2008, Meredith Emerson, a 24-year-old woman, decided to hike Blood Mountain in Georgia's Chattahoochee National Forest with her black Labrador Retriever. And as an experienced hiker, Meredith does everything right. But unfortunately, on that day, she crossed paths with Gary Hilton. Meredith fought back and fought so hard that she broke Gary Hilton's hand, and that was not supposed to happen. That was not in his plan. His previous victims, an elderly couple, Jon and Irene Bryant, they couldn't fight back, and Meredith could. So instead of killing her immediately, he abducted her and kept her alive for 4 days. He held her captive, torturing her and trying to get her debit card PIN number so he could steal her money from her bank. And when the PIN that she gave didn't work, he realized he couldn't get money from her, so he bludgeoned her to death with a tire iron. And a few days later, on January 4th, a witness at a Chevron gas station in DeKalb County saw a man matching Hilton's description, cleaning out his van with bleach. And this man called the police because that's incredibly suspicious. The police caught him and stopped him before he could finish destroying all of the evidence of his murder of Meredith. Her blood was all over the van, but prosecutors still had a problem. They had Hilton, they had evidence, but they didn't have Meredith's body, and her family has no idea where she is. Nobody knows where she is. So the move seemed to be to make a deal with Gary, to drop the death penalty in Georgia, and in return, Gary would tell the investigators where Meredith was. And also a part of that deal was to make sure that Dandy, Gary's dog, was rehomed instead of being euthanized. Gary agreed to the terms and led investigators to Meredith's body in the Dawson Forest Management area, and Gary's dog got to live. So Gary was sentenced to life in prison in Georgia, but over time, investigators started connecting dots to other murders. In October of 2007, Jon and Irene Bryant, the elderly couple we mentioned before, were murdered while hiking in North Carolina, and that was Gary Hilton. In December of 2007, Cheryl Dunlap, a 46-year-old nurse, was murdered in Florida's Apalachicola National Forest. That was also Hilton. And as a result of this all coming out, Gary received the death penalty in Florida and life sentences in North Carolina and Georgia. Gary is also suspected in more murders, Judy Smith, and a few others. There's a pattern very clearly. He specifically targeted national forests, isolated trails and places where people would hike alone where there's no cell service and no witnesses. Now we can move to Paul David Cruz, the shelter predator. On the morning of September 13th, 1990, at the Thelma Marks shelter in Pennsylvania, Jeffrey Hood and Molly LaRue are asleep in their sleeping bags and they're engaged, soon to be married. This is a young couple sharing an adventure before settling down and living the rest of their life together. And then a man walks into the shelter with the name of Paul David Cruz, but at the time he was using the alias David Casey Horn. And this man is on the run from Florida and he is armed with a firearm. He shoots Jeffrey Hood 3 times while he's still sleeping in his bag. Then he tied up Molly LaRue and stabbed her 8 times with a gigantic knife. After these horrific murders, a manhunt ensues, and for 8 days, Cruz walked the Appalachian Trail heading south towards Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, wearing the man that he murdered, Jeffrey Hood's, hiking gear, and carrying both murder weapons in his pack. Hikers along the trail started reporting a strange man with an oversized backpack acting bizarrely, and when authorities caught up with him, they found everything that they needed to put him away. They found Hood's gear, the gun that killed him, the ballistics matched, and they found the knife that killed Molly with her blood still on it. The trial lasted for days, and the jury deliberated for 49 minutes. Paul David Cruz was sentenced to death and died in prison before the sentence could be carried out. Then on to Randall Lee Smith, a man who murdered once in 1981 and then again 30 years later in 2008. In May of 1981, at the Wapiti shelter in southwestern Virginia, 2 social workers from Maine, a man by the name of Robert Mountford Jr. and a woman by the name of Laura Susan Ramsey, both 27 years old, are through hiking the Appalachian Trail to raise money for a school for mentally challenged children. They share their shelter that night with a local man named Randall Lee Smith. And while they slept, Smith shot Mountford in the head with a .22 caliber bullet, and after a struggle, he killed Ramsey in a brutal stabbing. Their bodies were both found buried under dirt and brush in their sleeping bags. And Randall Lee Smith pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He served only 15 and was released on parole in 1996. Fast forward to May 6th, 2008. Randall is now 54 years old and he's been out of prison for 12 years. And we have 2 fishermen, Scott Johnston, a 38-year-old man, and Sean Farmer, a 33-year-old man, on a fishing trip near Dismal Creek in Virginia. They encounter Randall, a man who seems friendly enough, and they share their dinner with him. At this point, they're camping less than 2 miles from where Randall murdered Mountford and Ramsey back in 1981. So Randall came back to the same spot and is hanging out with these 2 fellows, and without warning, he opened fire again. He shot Farmer in the head and chest and shot Johnston in the neck and back. Both went down grievously wounded, but they survived. After this, Randall tries to escape in Johnston's truck. He crashes it severely, and when police arrest him, he's injured from the crash, and 4 days later, he died in jail from those wounds he received in the crash. So Randall never stood trial for his second attack in the same area dozens of years later. It's unbelievable. In 2019, there was a hiker on the Appalachian Trail that went by the name of Sovereign. His real name was James Jordan. He's 32 years old, and everybody who runs into him knows that there is something wrong with him. He acts erratically, he's paranoid, he's aggressive, and in April 2019, he's arrested in Tennessee for threatening other hikers with a knife. He's charged with criminal impersonation, drug possession, and drug paraphernalia. He gets probation, pays fines, and then he's released. And a few weeks later, he's back on the trail. Then on May 10th, 2019, he's in the George Washington and Jefferson National Forest in Virginia. A group of hikers sets up camp near a shelter, and James Jordan is there. He's acting increasingly disturbed and unstable. That night, he approaches their tent, starts talking through the tent walls and rambling. Then he threatens them. He says he's going to pour gasoline on their tents and burn them to death. So obviously the 2 hikers flee into the woods and call 911. The police are contacted in Wythe County, Virginia. But before anyone could respond, Jordan returned to the campsite in the early morning hours of May 11th, where Ronald Sanchez Jr. and a woman from Canada are still there. Ronald was a 43-year-old man who served 16 years in the Army, 3 combat tours in Iraq, as a combat engineer. He survived all of that, but James Jordan attacked him with a machete. The Canadian woman watched Jordan stab Sanchez, then Jordan turned on her, stabbed her in the face, the arms, the leg, and torso. While this was happening, something in the woman's mind told her to fall to the ground and play dead, and that saved her life. Jordan stopped the attack, stood over her, and then walked away to find his dog. And the moment the coast was clear, she ran, bleeding from multiple stab wounds. She ran down the trail for 6 miles until she found other hikers who helped her to safety. Ronald died on the campsite. For this murder, James Jordan was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder with acute psychotic symptoms. The doctors officially concluded that he was unable to appreciate the wrongfulness of his acts due to his delusion and inability to, he was an insane person. He is committed indefinitely to a psychiatric facility within the Bureau of Prisons. So James was arrested weeks before for threatening hikers with a knife. Everyone on the trail knew he was dangerous. Hikers were posting warnings about him, the system that they knew, and they let him back out there, and he unfortunately murdered one person and tried to murder another. This next murder case didn't happen recently, but it was solved recently. In fact, it was solved in 2024 and was cold since 1996. This is the Williams and Winans Shenandoah murders. On May 24th, 1996, at the Shenandoah National Park, there were 2 women named Julianne Williams and Laura Lolly Winans. Both were 26 years old and are camping near the Skyland Resort, which I'm pretty sure is in Luray, which is just south of Front Royal. These women are partners, they're experienced hikers, and they're very careful. Fast forwarding to June 1st, someone finds them with their wrists bound and their throats slit. And for 28 years, this case was unsolved. There was a suspect early on by the name of Daryl David Rice. Surveillance footage caught him entering the park at the Front Royal entrance on May 25th, the day after the murders, and Rice was charged, but the DNA didn't match at the scene, so the charges were dropped. And after this, the case went cold. So 28 years later, in June of 2024, the FBI announces that they've identified the killer. His name is Walter Jackson Sr., and he's a convicted serial rapist from Ohio who died in prison in 2018. They discovered this through new DNA technology and a methodical re-review of evidence by a fresh new FBI team. This has been happening a lot. Fortunately, it's still a tragedy that this couldn't have happened earlier. In 28 years of just unknown for the families of the murdered. I mean, it's terrible. But with this re-review, evidence was submitted to a private lab and they got a DNA profile and ran that through the CODIS system. And they found a match. The match was Jackson, a man who was a residential painter and an avid hiker, and he was known to frequent the Shenandoah National Park. And just days after murdering Julie and Loli, he kidnapped and raped a woman at knife point in Ohio, and a month later, he did it again. He was in prison for those when he died in 2018 and was never charged with the Shenandoah murders because they couldn't connect him until all the way in 2024. So that incredibly tragic case was cold for a long time, but was solved recently. There are more cold cases that still have yet to be solved. For example, the case of Louis Chaput from 2001. On November 15th, 2001, Louis Chaput, a 52-year-old woman, drove from Sherbrooke, Quebec to Pinkham's Grant in New Hampshire. She reserved a room at the Joe Dodge Lodge at the Appalachian Mountain Club Visitor Center and was spending a solo weekend trip in the mountains. She arrived at 3 p.m. with daylight fading, and she walked into the AMC Visitor Center and asked a worker for directions to a short hike, something she can do and get back before dark. The worker gave her directions, and Louise turned and walked out the door. That was the last time that anyone saw her alive. 7 days later, on November 22nd, she was reported missing by her family when she didn't return. And park rangers found Louise Chaput's body near the Glen Ellis Falls parking lot. She had been stabbed multiple times, and it was ruled as a homicide. And several items were missing from her person. Her dark blue Canuck brand sleeping bag, a blue backpack with a Canadian insignia, her car keys, and a pendant with an S design on it. And in a few weeks will mark the 23rd year since Louis Chaput was murdered, and no one has ever been charged for this murder. No witnesses ever came forward. She was hiking alone, a foreign visitor in a country not her own, and investigators called it a tough case, and that's clearly an understatement because it's been forever. Her sleeping bag, backpack, keys, and pendant were never found, and her killer was never identified. The case is still listed on New Hampshire's Cold Case Unit's victim list and still officially open, still officially unsolved. As tragic and horrifying as it is, at least Louis Chaput had a name, a family, people who remember her, but there was a body found along the Appalachian Trail that wasn't even identifiable, and even less information and evidence was found as to the cause of what happened to her. In March of the year 2000, fishermen found a woman's naked body in a lake near the Appalachian Trail. She had been dead for about a month. Law enforcement was contacted immediately. They produced a sketch and they distributed it and investigate, and nothing. No one reported her missing, no one recognizes the sketch, and no DNA matches to any database. No identification, no leads, and it's been 25 years. We don't know who she is, we don't know who killed her, we don't even know how she died, though investigators obviously have theories. But how does this even happen? How does someone vanish so completely that not a single person reports them missing? Not family, not friends, not coworkers, not anyone. Just a Jane Doe, a murder victim with no name, a person that is either erased from existence or just never existed. Then if we go all the way back to 1975, we have the first direct Appalachian Trail murder, the very bottom of the rabbit hole of danger and legend and fear and mythos of this area is dangerous, the national parks are dangerous. That's what people think, that's what people believe. And you can make your own decisions, obviously, but the first Appalachian Trail murder is a woman by the name of Janice Balsa. Janice Balsa was a 22-year-old woman in April of 1975. She was a fresh graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Nursing, and she started a thru hike in February from Springer Mountain, Georgia, and by April, she was in northeastern Tennessee. She made it to the Vandeventer shelter and is sitting by a campfire when a man approaches her. This man's name is Paul Bigley. He's a 51-year-old former mental patient, and he has a hatchet. He kills Janice Balsa at that campfire, and his motive when he confessed to the Carter County Sheriff's Office was he coveted her backpack. So that's crazy. Paul Bigley was convicted and died in prison like all these other So after everything we've covered, mysterious disappearances, legends, actual murders, serial killers, a Jane Doe that's unidentified, there's definitely patterns to all of this. And after everything we've gone through in this video, you guys probably think the Appalachian Trail is a death trap, or the national parks are death traps. If you watch the Missing 411 stuff, it's so easy to kind of, get sort of caught up in that there's all these people who just go missing, and it's f***ed up, and sometimes they disappear without a trace, and there's the patterns from the Missing 411 stuff, and then serial killers follow a pattern. It's the serial killer playground. It's the middle of nowhere. It's a place where people vanish into thin air, or at least it feels that way. But if you take the genuine statistics into count, since 1974, that's 51 years, there have been at least 10, and some sources say 13 murders on the Appalachian Trail. And, that's not very many. That's a very long time. You're more likely to go get murdered in St. Louis or whatever random city. But still, that is a lot. That is a ton over that period of time. But growing up, I felt like, man, you go up there, you're gonna get killed. It's scary in the woods, man. It's so scary in there. And it's such a long part of the national forest system in America, but still, 10 to 13, it seems like quite a bit less. It's sort of a perspective shift. And that is, of course, people who are murdered on the Appalachian Trail, not just in general in those national parks that the trail runs through. This is just a specific smaller part of a larger whole that we're covering in this video. That is the Appalachian Trail and the legends regarding it. Even if you take the 13 murder number, that averages out to be one murder every 4 to 5 years. Then around 6 people go missing on the trail annually, with varying sources. Some say 2, some say 6, some are found, some aren't. And with all that in consideration, of the most recent years, approximately 4 million people visit the Appalachian Trail every single year. Most are hikers, but thousands attempt section hikes and through hikes. So if we take this information, the Appalachian Trail's murder rate works out to be roughly 0.65 homicides per 100,000 users in a year. And the national average for the United States in 2023 was 6.8 homicides per 100,000. That is 10 times higher than the Appalachian Trail. So it's absolutely a legend thing. I'm not diminishing the murders or tragedies that have occurred. You obviously should stay safe, watch your back, but don't be afraid to go in nature, and don't be afraid to confront the unknown, which is literally what nature is. You are objectively safer hiking the Appalachian Trail than walking the streets of most American cities. And you're way more likely to die from nature from a fall, a heart attack, a bee sting if you're allergic, than any human being or magic monster, cryptid, wolfman, whatever, on the Appalachian Trail or anywhere for that matter. So I thought this would be a really interesting video. You know, I've covered a lot of the legends and cryptids and all the scary stories without kind of, I don't know, just kind of looking at it from this perspective, I guess. And it's relieving. It's way less mysterious, but it's good to know, I feel. And that still does not change the fact that people do go missing and terrible stuff does happen, and you should, you know, be aware and better safe than sorry. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this deep dive rabbit hole into the specific Appalachian Trail legends and cases of the whole national parks murder phenomenon. If you want to see more content like this, press the like button down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Go to the Gump Club, by the way, to watch uncensored videos, and sour.gg to buy some candy and stuff, and download The Legend of Zulk, which is the mobile game that I made as a joke to play along video. I'm not going to do it in this video because that would be very disrespectful, but you know, the joke was to make a mobile game and then just play the footage of my own version of Subway Surfers. Be like, I made that as a joke, and now it's not really even a joke. It was supposed to be ironic at first, but now it's an actual game. So anyways, thanks for watching.